And yes, viewers, we are easing into Good Morning Tobago. And if you didn't know by now, you should know that we are doing the Beneath the Surface series right here on Tobago Updates, a series where we are peeling back the layers to politicians to really find out what goes into governing the island of Tobago. For those of you new to the Updates family, for those of you new to this space, you don't know me from a place, you don't know this space from nowhere. My name is Luke James Trim, and I'm proud to be your host for this morning's session. I'm also joined by
Shenell, Felix, guys, whenever you see me sitting here, it's because we're about to have those conversations that you want to have while I ask the questions that you want asked. And as my co-host said this morning, we are continuing our Beneath the Surface series. And this morning is one like all others. We are asking the tough questions. And this morning in the hot seat, we have Assemblyman Zorisha Hackett. Good morning
Good
and welcome.
morning. Good morning, Miss Felix. Good morning, Mr. James.
Good morning.
Good morning, Tobago. Happy New Year, because it's my first time on the air for the new year, 2025. So Happy New Year, Tobago.
Right. Well, I mean, we always welcome you here. And this
Thank
morning,
you.
we are continuing the series. And I'm guessing that you saw some of your colleagues
Yes, I
on
did. And what I
before.
missed live, I went back and I looked at, because I'm so proud of my colleagues. That's
Excellent.
been a really challenging
And so
2
you
years.
would know that we really started off by trying to get to know some of you a bit. And you are no stranger to Tobago, and neither are you any stranger to the Tobago Updates audience.
Yes.
But this morning, for those persons who are not familiar with your upbringing and what brought you into the political sphere, let them know.
Wow. So, born and raised Bethesda Trace, Plymouth. Actually, when the electoral district split into Bethesda, Leketo, and Plymouth Blackrock, I was confused because I always knew Bethesda as being a subset of the larger community of Plymouth. But born and raised there, I actually attended Smithfield Kindergarten for 1 year and then Sunbeam Kindergarten there in Plymouth. We called it Pastor Mac, fondly called that. And then I went on to the Plymouth Anglican Primary School. I did my common entrance, and yes, I'm that old, common entrance, and passed on to the Bishop's High School. I spent 7 years there. Fun fact, I actually wanted to go to Signal Hill for sixth form because my subject alignment was more in tandem with what was offered there. But I was into instruments at Bishop's High School, and Mr. Moore and Miss Armstrong had invested so much into me. And the year I was going over to sixth form, it was a music festival year. And so I played several instruments, and so I had to remain at Bishop's High School. So I eventually spent 7 years there. And see House, good morning. School celebrating 100 years this year, and so we're so proud of the Bishop's High School legacy. I then went on immediately to, I worked at Cocoa Reef for 1 year, and I got some really good customer service training there. And then I went on to BWIA, it was called at that time. I spent a couple of months, and then Agnes Murray Thomas, my former English teacher, saw me one day at the airport and said, you need to get into teaching. It has always been your life dream. It's good that you got the experience out there, but get into teaching. And so at 19 years old, I started teaching at what was called CRU Secondary Center, which eventually morphed into what is now called the Goodwood Secondary School. And so I spent 3 years there, and then I went off to university. I did a double major, linguistics and literature with education, a minor in education. I began a master's in an MPhil in linguistics, and then I was advised, to be a teacher, what you really need is a postgraduate diploma in education. You could go all the way up to PhD. You wouldn't have that upward mobility in the teaching fraternity if you don't have a DPED. So I paused, got that out of the way, had some challenges with it because the program I did, there was actually a minor, as I said, in education. And so because I was the second cohort of students, the University of the West Indies was still trying to fine tune what that meant in the broader picture of academics. And so after that, I started a master's in government, and then found another that I was more interested in called strategic leadership and innovation, which I'm on the home stretch of. You know how it is when you're working and going to school. But I have several postgraduate certificates in government, in education, in linguistics, in leadership,
How does a teacher go from teaching to being in politics?
Oh my God. So we should ask the chief secretary that. So in around 2016, after I had my second daughter, And I started experiencing more than usual challenges as a contracted employee, and we are classified as educators in the Tobago space. I was like, listen, we need to be able to push the policies in a particular direction, and we weren't getting that passion and that enthusiasm and even the political will from those in authority. And so now Chief Secretary and myself, we led a charge of a group of contracted teachers into demanding fair and equitable service from the Tobago House of Assembly. And that came about because I was having some challenges with my maternity leave, being on contract, and so we started exploring our avenues or legal avenues. And at that point in time, Fali, so lovingly called at that point in time, not the honorable and all of that, decided that he would get into the politics. It has always been a lifelong goal of his, never my interest, but of course, being one of his best friends, I told him, wherever you go, I'm going to support you fully. And so he entered the fold and I remember the day clearly, the 19th of November, 2016. He had his first political speech up there at Lucyville Speyside as a candidate for the Progressive Democratic Patriots, which he went on to win. I was his campaign manager, and I told him, I'll support him every step of the way. And so by the time we got to 2020, right after the general elections of 2020, he asked me to consider. Now, before that, mind you, in 2017, that 2017 election, Mr. Duke had also approached me to contest the Plymouth Golden Lane seat. When he approached me, I was a new mother. My daughter was probably only 3 months old. And I found it was not the best time. And I was not even considering that because I saw all the negative elements surrounding the politics of the day. And I just saw myself as being, an activist, very vocal, very passionate, and thinking that you don't have to be in the forefront or actually sitting at governance to make a difference. But the frustration of seeing who, was actually at the fore, and the fact that we were going through the same routine over and over again, by the time now Chief Secretary approached me in 2020, right after that general election, and it was still called Plymouth Golden Lane at that time. I went back to my community because I no longer live in that Plymouth Golden Lane area. I went back to my community, and after getting full support, because you have to understand that it's not you making a decision, you're not voting for yourself. All I'm afforded is one vote for myself. If the community is not, backing you, is not supportive, is not going to give you that, and of course, after having a conversation with God, because you also have to ensure that, you're in that right place to make such a tough decision that is ultimately going to affect your family life, your educational pursuits, your goals, if it was not your career, the career path you had for yourself. And so after I felt as if I had solid enough support from that community, I decided to make that step. And oh my God, 2 steps in 1 year, because moving from area representative of Plymouth Golden Lane to then area representative of Bethesda Leketo in the same year, it was a real challenge. We had a lot of getting used to. We didn't have the opportunity to even go to the house in that 6-6 deadlock period. So we didn't have the practice. We had to learn the standing orders, on our own. And so it was the most challenging period, moving from teacher to area representative in a 6-6 period, so not getting that governance experience, and then moving straight into governance, becoming a secretary of the very division that I was an employee of, and being able to advocate for some of the changes directly that we saw being necessary to changing the landscape of governance, say, on the island of Tobago.
Excellent, Ms. Hackett. And I want you to talk to me about navigating through the challenges of the dark side of politics, because, speaking with some of your colleagues, most of them would have spoken about how the attacks are coming and how they navigate, especially having a family.
Yes.
And it takes me back to when that whole audio gate thing had happened, and you were one of the main faces of that issue. But I want you to talk to us about navigating that, not as secretary, not as assemblyman, but
as Zorisha Hackett.
And a mother, because I can only imagine, like we touched on with Mr. Kerr, is that you have children going to school, and they may be exposed to people who may not support you politically. When your parents speaking negatively, the children now come to school and repeat what the parents are saying. So how did you navigate that as a mother?
Listen to me, the toughest period ever So I have an 18-year-old daughter. She was about 15 going on 16 when I got into this, right? And the thing about it is an 8-year-old and an 18-year-old, 10 years apart. The thing about it is, so the 8-year-old, it was very easy for me to break down things to her. She's not exposed to social media. At that point in time, it was the COVID period, so she was not physically in a school space or anything. You know, but you see that now 18-year-old, it was the most difficult period ever because she saw her mother as her role model. And then you're going to school and you're hearing all these things, even outside of Audio Gate. In general, she felt as if she had to be a part of the journey with me, although she didn't, you know, see herself as being a part of the journey. And she went through several challenges, several moments of depression, moments of, mommy, why did you get involved in this? Because now I am actually facing the backlash as well. We had all the fake profiles, even calling her out as a minor in the midst of it all. And she told me, mommy, at the end of fifth form, I am not staying in Tobago. I don't want to. I love you, but it's so much for me as a teenager to have to endure. And I'm there trying to become my own person and so on. But, you know, I'm being identified as your daughter. And so your wins are my wins. But, you know, whenever you face a backlash, me, and I mean, it's so unfair for a minor to also have to treat with that, you know. She excelled at the CSEC and she decided to give it one more chance. She came back and she went off to sixth form at Signal Hill. And after that year, and she did well as well at Signal Hill, she told me, mommy, I think I need a change in environment. So my daughter currently does not live in Tobago, that older daughter. It has been a real challenge. Now the house is empty because grandmother takes care of the younger one because you know how it goes. On any given point in time, my schedule changes in a heartbeat. Sometimes I'm getting home after 10, 11 in the night. Sometimes midnight meets me at the desk signing off files. And then now I am one of the 2 secretaries without an assistant secretary, Secretary of Finance and myself. We don't have assistant secretary. So we're taking that load of the division on our own. We're bearing that burden alone. And so your family life is greatly affected. No one can deny the fact that active public life forces you to sacrifice so much of your family life, you know. My father was extremely ill recently. And, you know, I had to take some time out to see about him. He lives with me now. And, you know, just putting your all into it is makes you sacrifice other elements of your life. And I think it's the burden we bear as public figures. The fact that I hear a lot of people talking about it, the glamour, it looks so glamorous and so on. And I'm not complaining about this because I think it was a calling. I think it was a blessing too. And it is indeed a privilege to serve in this capacity. But I want anyone looking on at us and at previous administrations to understand that it comes with a lot of sacrifice.
Right. And even as you indicated that you spent a lot of time this year, well, last year as well, taking care of your dad, there are times that persons may not have seen you physically at the division and thinking to themselves, well, wait, we haven't
if you're not, so let's pause there. If you're not seeing me physically at the division, it's because I'm in my district. And let me tell you, for me, being an area representative comes first. A division has an administrator, there's a technical advisor or 2 in some divisions, and there are technocrats that would head every unit. All right? In that 6-6 period, for instance, where you had some holdover secretaries, the divisions didn't shut down. You had secretaries holding down 2 and 3 divisions, they didn't shut down. Yeah? If we go on a retreat, the division's doors don't close. If a secretary travels, the business of the division continues. And so when I'm not in my division, more than likely I'm in my district. And that's the thing, When we walked into our doors, that first day for me would have been probably the 13th of December, 2021. And I made a schedule of how I'm going to spend my time as area representative / secretary. And as I said, you're area representative first. If you are not elected into office, then you can be appointed into the executive council. And so I worked my work week in a particular way where 50% of my time would have been spent in my district, 50% in the division, and of course you have 1 day. So 2 days, and that 1 day for executive council. And in a short period of time, I had to realize, you know, it can't work like that. There are some days when your district would require more of you, and there are some days when your division would require more of you. And so that schedule I made for myself had to be quickly shelved, because if the secretary's signature doesn't go on particular documents, it's stalled right there in the secretary's office. Yeah? Another thing about this secretary, I am not sitting and pushing paper all day and not on the field. And in my particular field, the schools are my field. Also, the Division of Education is responsible for libraries, and we have 3 such libraries on the island. We also have 2 special purpose companies under purview, THTI and TITL. And so if you have a secretary in the division 8 to 4, Monday to Friday, then a lot of the actual work, which requires you moving on the ground, your ground in the divisional perspective, and seeing what's happening in your schools, what's happening with your teachers, highlighting and showcasing the achievements of the divisions. And I believe strongly in marketing and PR. And I think this administration, we have done an excellent job at that, but there's a lot more to be desired as it relates to marketing and showcasing our achievements. And I have made it my duty, right, without fair contradiction, to highlight and showcase our achievements. I know sometimes you always get that, you're showing something that you should be doing anyway as secretary. Yeah. Our role as public figures is to be accountable to the people. And so we must find a way to demonstrate to the people who have placed us in this particular position with a specific mandate that we are getting the job done.
And
so
Ms. Hackett, before you continue, Ms. Hackett, while we're still on the wave of the division, one of your division's goal was inclusive education by 2024. Yes. So talk to us a bit about that, any progress we have seen.
Oh, wow, so we're just shifting gears quickly here. Right. So inclusive education for some persons is, okay, we have persons who are differently abled or persons along a particular spectrum, and so we build a special institution for them. Okay. That is not inclusive education for me. You know what inclusive education is? That if I'm a child that has a challenge, either psychologically or physically, I can be integrated into the regular school system. Okay. So we have some challenges with the infrastructure of some of our schools. And for the most part, there are particular schools. If you, for instance, at the end of the SCA process, you're transitioning over to secondary schools, there are few schools that if you have a physical disability, you would not be able to attend because you may not be able to move around on the plant. There's going to be mobility issues. But we have quite a few. The layout affords that. CRU Secondary School for the most part, Harmon School of SDA for the most part. And so what we have been doing with about 6 or 7 of our primary schools, about 8 of our 12 ECCEs, and these 2 secondary schools for the most part, because then you still have to respect the option of the parent and child. And so we try our very best, if those are not the 2 schools, that we can give them the opportunity. It's just that we may have to move entire classrooms and teaching structures around the child. But for the most part, we have spent time upgrading these facilities to ensure that a student who has a challenge can attend these schools with limited mobility issues. And so, again, for me, inclusive education means actually being able to integrate students with particular disabilities or challenges into the actual school system, what we have here, and enhancing these facilities to be able to accommodate them. Separate from that, we have a challenge where for the last few decades or so, both Happy Haven and the School for the Deaf, Speech and Language Impaired have been having infrastructural challenges there. We have, for instance, the School for the Deaf sharing a compound with the Bonaccord Government Primary School. And then we have Happy Haven. We've spent a lot renovating and so on, but it's not the most optimal, or it's not the most suitable environment, especially in a technologically advanced world, and all the accommodations being made in that first world environment for students who are mentally or physically challenged. Yeah. And so we have spent some time advocating strongly for us to have a special school to accommodate those. But for the most part, if they're able to be integrated into the regular school scenario, that we will have that integration. So yes, we want, as one of the priority projects of the Division of Education, is to finally clear that land. It's adjacent to the school, Happy Haven School up there at Signal Hill, to clear that land and prepare it for construction.
Okay.
Construction is not a drop in the bucket, Luke, and as you would appreciate, with so many priority projects across the entire assembly, that is going to be one of the projects that, we'll have to have some cutbacks and make some solid investments in, but we have to start the project. And so we've been charged with that responsibility of preparation works for that school. Secretary of Finance has also pledged to me her commitment to such a vision because we see the need for it. But I want to reiterate on the fact that inclusion for me means being integrated into the regular school system.
Understood.
Yeah?
All right, viewers, so we're going to take a quick break and we'll be right back. Just remember to share the live, share the live, share the live.
Good morning and welcome back to Good Morning Tobago right here on Tobago Updates. Guys, we continue our Beneath the Surface series, and this morning we have been chatting with Assemblyman Zorisha Hackett. Good morning and welcome back.
Morning again.
Right, so one of the topics that have continued to be on the cards when we talk about education has been the CRU Secondary School.
Oh my gosh.
And you had a sub-turning for that
yes.
last year.
Yeah, to signify our intent to construct, yeah?
Yes. And we heard from the minority side that there was very little communication regarding that sub-turning with the Minister for Education. She would have indicated to them that the first time she saw it is when it was live on television.
The minority said that?
Yes.
Does the
During their
minority understand the tenets of Act 40 of 1996? So I don't, probably out of courtesy, but I don't have to report to the Minister of Education as it relates to construction of a school. Act 40 of 1996 under the 5th schedule, item 25 to be specific, gives the Tobago House of Assembly full remit over education inclusive of curriculum. And so, if it's an invitation out of courtesy, I understand that, but I don't understand the demand of the secretary to, and even with that being a speaking point
in
as it relates to
the request to the central government for funding for the school. We know that I believe it was 500,000.
So we make requests to the central government through draft estimates in June every year. Does that mean for every project that the Tobago House of Assembly every project we embark on, that we have to send invitations to central government because that's where we're getting the allocation? I don't understand that claim. What I can say is that the Tobago House of Assembly is fully responsible for the construction of schools, both infrastructure and education, under the purview of the Tobago House of Assembly. And so what the central government should be focused on is honoring the commitment to fund. When I saw the allocation of $500,000 to CRU Secondary, when we got that budget statement on the 30th of September 2024, I was taken aback because $500,000 can't even prepare the space. And so the Caribbean Development Bank, upon us, assuming office, came to Tobago, and I walked several sites with the chief secretary, and after all the consultations we did with the school and all the stakeholders of CRU Secondary School, and prepared preliminary user brief and all this, work that we've put in as a Tobago House of Assembly, and being told, that we should not try going in the direction of attaining a loan from the CDB, and that the central government was committed to ensuring that we got the funding necessary. As a matter of fact, I want to jog Tobagonians' memory back to one of the last budget presentations of the People's National Movement before we went into that 2021 Tobago House of Assembly election. And CRU Secondary School was dangled like a carrot from a stick from then Secretary of Finance. And so to have CRU Secondary School always come up in or around an election period, it hurts me, because I know as secretary how much we've invested in CRU Secondary School in its current state, how much we've spent in school repair programs to ensure that while they remain down there on Old Government Farm Road extension, that they get the necessary upgrades and so on to ensure that we don't have challenges with that plant. But it cannot be that you're now making the challenge about us receiving an allocation to go ahead with the construction of that school being predicated on a minister receiving an invitation. And so I want us to stop playing the political games. It's either you allow us as an assembly to be able to borrow to build that school, or you honor your commitment of funding that school. That school, based on the user brief and the intentions we have, is supposed to be one of a smart school design and one to be very advanced when compared to what secondary schools offer in this part of the Western Hemisphere. And so we had so many plans for what we wanted to see happen there, and to also use that as a template moving forward, because I mean, with population increase very soon, we're going to run short of the spaces available on the 9 secondary schools, or in the 9 secondary schools rather, on this island. And so the conversation should be one about honoring commitment and not spending time, articulating positions of who was invited and egos and all of that there. I want to see a new school built for Scarborough Secondary School, and I want the central government to honor their commitment. There is nothing else. No pleasantries or platitudes or anything. Let us get along with the business of the people. Former administration articulated very strongly about that position, spoke to it, dangled it like a carrot on a stick, spent a lot of time treating with land issues and where the school would be built. It was found that the property they allocated or they had put aside for the school was not suitable. The Tobago House of Assembly looked at its land stock, found suitable property, and of course you want it to be in or around the Scarborough area to maintain or to retain that name. And so we were able to write on the opposite side what we call Bacalet Park. The land is there, 27 or so acres put aside for the construction of the school. It's time for us to build the school, and that's all I'm interested in at the moment. Nothing else.
Understood. And
Yes.
where are you in the entire process right now?
Well, $500,000. We decided to go ahead, clear the property, have it fenced in and so on, but that's as much as we can do. And again, that speaks to autonomy, Shenell. And every time we end up, encountering a hurdle, an obstacle along our developmental trajectory as an assembly, it's because of that autonomy question. The fact that we have to sit and wait on a central government to either honor commitment or give us permission to be able to, stand with us if we go out there and try to get some financing, for that school. And it begs of a question of who really advocates for us in that 41-member House of Representatives. Because I would have expected MP for Tobago East or West in that conversation not to spend time talking about, and even the minority, talking about who was invited and who wasn't invited. That's the least of our issues. Who is advocating for us to hold the Minister of Finance accountable and hold him to account for that commitment he made to the Chief Secretary, who also served as a Secretary of Finance at that point in time. That is the direction I want the conversation to go in. And if it's not going in there, I will not be a part of that conversation. As a former teacher of Scarborough Secondary School, I spent almost 10 years there. I will continue to advocate strongly for the reconstruction of that plant, and that's as far as I would take any such conversation.
Understood, Ms. Hackett. And it's good you touched on so many points from, Scarborough Secondary always being subject to extensive commentary where infrastructure is concerned. I recall one of my good friends, the first time I met her, that's Miss Kaylee Lewis, was on TV6 News protesting.
Wow.
Protesting because of the
Council,
issue.
yes.
Protesting because of the issue at Scarborough Secondary School. And any young person in this space, they can tell you that, Scarborough Secondary School has always been at that issue. Infrastructure is a problem. According to Miss Lewis, just now we have to teach the students how to swim. And the mere fact that...
Let me tell you, Luke, as you're there, I was there for 10 years and we had to bring that perimeter fence in about 3 or 4 times. And that's just to speak to the rapid rate of erosion of that plant. And I know there were several conversations, that entire stretch of coastal space, from Coast Guard all the way down to Lambo. There's been several conversations in this space about retaining walls and everything that needs to happen in order to save that piece of infrastructure and the land that's there. But I mean, all the talks for decades, and we have to come in as a new administration and contend with that challenge. It just speaks to political will. So we have the talk, and you're very correct. It became a challenge where students protested at one point in time. We have the PT, a very active PT at that, always articulating the positions. We have a very powerful alumni association there as well that advocates strongly. The teachers, we have the challenges where the teachers themselves speak to, the day-to-day issues of that plant. I myself endured a injury on the plant. I fell on the plant, cracked tiles. Tiles are always moving, the land is shifting. And so it's, not for want of advocating for it. And so you're correct that we have students even getting into the conversations. And as I said before, spending time speaking about who was invited, I want central government to be able to honor their commitment so we can get the construction of this school off the ground.
And still on the topic of students getting involved in the conversation, island-wide, nationwide, we understand that Tobago's autonomy has been one that is a very interesting conversation. And we understand that in order to get that engagement, in order for people to really understand the autonomy discussion, it starts at education, especially with our young people. As Secretary for Education, what can we expect to see rolling out from your division to really educate our youth about what autonomy means to the island, what is autonomy, and by extension, how constitutional reform works? All right.
So before we get into that, let me just spend some time just congratulating the presiding officer and the work she has been doing and the Assembly legislature have been doing in collaboration with the Division of Education as it relates to ensuring our young persons have a voice. And so through her annual Tobago House of Assembly Day debate, that Tobago Day debate, we see young persons getting into the conversations of the day and being very true to themselves in putting their voices out there and advocating for what we expect them to advocate for as the next leaders of this island. Through this whole vision of the Tobago-centric curriculum, and again, Act 40 of 1996 affords the Tobago House of Assembly the responsibility to even transform curriculum, even if it's divergent to what is in national scope, And so we have spent a lot of time really getting into how do we see a citizen of Tobago moving in this space and moving globally. And so we realize that it cannot be a one-size-fit-all copy and paste modality of education here on the island. And so we spent the last year and a half or so really getting into how do you expect that Tobago child to view the world and to view themselves as being a part of the larger global picture. And so that Tobago-centric curriculum, it wasn't just a buzzword. We knew it wouldn't happen overnight, and we also knew that one term would not be enough for curriculum transformation. I mean, after all, we have a climate where it's very exam-driven, and we have particular examinations that parents push that sense of status and your ability to excel as an individual on the exam-oriented model. And so we want students to be able to leave the primary, ECC, primary, secondary school system understanding the role they play as contributing, positive contributors to society. And so it comes right back to the autonomy question being a part of the overall Tobago-centric vision. And that Tobago-centric vision gives that child, or that student rather, the opportunity to play a role in even the governance structure. And so it's through that particular modality that we want to be able to give students the opportunity to understand the struggle. Where did it start? What's my role in this vision? And we have currently at the moment a book, and I don't know if you've been following the politics of the day, but you're seeing that the Chief Secretary has been spending quite a lot of time through this podcast educating Tobago, autocorrect and autofocus, And so we have had this committee that he's put together with Miss Ingrid Melville, attorney at law Ingrid Melville, Mr. Alan Richards, and even Dr. Winford James. And they have come up with some literature and a series of other strategies to ensure that we can integrate it into the same Tobago-centric curriculum, of which Dr. Winford James is also one of the committee members. And so we have a really beautiful piece of literature that is going to be given to every student from about standard 1 all the way up to secondary school, probably upper 6th or so, that breaks down that autonomy conversation to them in a way that it's going to be very palatable, and they're able to absorb and even question it further, And so further than that, we will be making a call very soon to Tobagonians on island, in the Republic, in the diaspora, globally. Contribute to the literature, contribute to what we put into the book bags of our students. We have to reimagine education, and reimagining education would cause us as Tobagonians to even rewrite, how we view ourselves on a national level. And so the conversation must now be one where it's not just about a teacher going into a classroom and you're opening a math book because there's a math exam at the end of standard 5. But how do you incorporate every aspect of the education system into that pursuit of Tobago's quest for self-determination. So
Right.
yes, ma'am, and yes, sir, we are definitely going in that direction of, for the first time, really challenging what it means to be responsible for curriculum on the island.
And we want to touch a bit on what's happening at the district level now. You
Yes.
came in as a
Oh my
representative for Plymouth Bethesda.
Right, so it
and
was
then
Plymouth Golden Lane first,
Correct.
and then Bethesda Leketo is the current name of the electoral district.
exactly. And so how were you able and how are you able to continue to engage those persons that are part of the new district construction, specifically those in the Golden Lane area?
Right.
Because, you know,
Yes.
persons often say you're a Plymouth girl. So how do you keep them engaged to the point where they don't feel
So like
left
Golden
behind?
Lane residents here, you say I'm a Plymouth girl, because they think I'm more Golden Lane girl probably now. But so my electoral district changed where one polling station was dropped off, right? So Plymouth is divided with a imaginary line through Jager's Hall. All right? And so Jager's Hall is where, if you're going easterly of Jager's Hall, is what we call lovingly and fondly Goat Rock, and what we call Freedom on the next side of Shelbourne Street. So that's where the boundary is. West of there is the electoral district of Assemblyman Niall George. And so my district goes from there all the way up to Woodlands Mariah. So I go from part of Plymouth, then I go into Leketo, then Golden Lane, and part of Mariah, Woodlands Mariah. And so because of how much we did as area representatives, even the 6 that didn't make it in that 6-6 deadlock, how much we did in that 11 months, our electoral districts expected so much of us. We spent every waking moment on the ground. And of course, that's easier to do when you're outside of the governance structure. You're not executive council members. And so in that period where we transitioned into holding both portfolios, like me, for instance, area rep and division secretary in that regard, you had to be able to express to your residents what that dual role meant. And the fact that where I could have spent every day on the block, hearing the needs, putting up tents here, there, and everywhere, and spending time in and around the district, it is now balance with spending that time seeing about the needs of the people through the policies and programs and so on. And so having that dual role comes with some challenges, because you're now in a position to make the plans or put the plans into action, but now your residents aren't seeing you as much as they need to see you. What I've done to be able to ensure that I bridge that gap is ensure that my district office staff become the ears and eyes of their area representative. Now, it doesn't take away from your actual role. Some people just want to see you, feel you, you know, and it's not that they would always want or make a demand of you. Sometimes they just want to pray for you. Sometimes just to see if you're okay, to ensure that you know that you still have their fullest support. And so you have to ensure that you empower your district staff in a particular way and empower the district itself to make moves. So even if you're not physically there, they can be empowered enough to what is required of the district. And that comes, for instance, where you ensure that you empower your village councils, your youth groups, your police youth groups, for instance, and all the subsets of your community in a particular way, where they take the initiative and then come to you for that support or probably for guidance into how to get particular things done. But it has not really been a challenge to me. As I said, I don't live in my electoral district, so I'm not physically there. If, you know, I open my door, I'm seeing my residents. That takes a lot out of me, because I would now have to physically traverse from where I live here in Scarborough to my electoral district. But I think that open door policy, having your residents know that they can call you at any time. They may not always get you, because of course, if you're sitting in a meeting, if you're doing an interview like I am right now and they're trying to call you, they wouldn't be able to get you. But that call back, that response, that having someone else take the call for you, or responding to you, or trying to meet their needs on your behalf is very critical. Also empowering the residents themselves so they can give information on your behalf, you know? And so I think it's a blessing to be able to serve. And if you ask me which one of the roles I enjoy more, it will be that of area representative, because that is where you feel as if you're really making the impact on the ground with the people. And I have a very close relationship with my residents. when they call me assemblyman or they call me secretary in the district, it feels very out of place because I know what it felt like to be on the outside in that. And I keep referring to that 6-6 period. We probably need some counseling with that period because it was a really crazy period. You know, we felt very out of place and so on. But I want to continue to let my residents know that the journey continues with them. And it's not the area representative in front leading a district. It's the area representative side by side with the residents of the district, ensuring that, you know, we meet the needs, you know, together. And so I remain committed to my electoral district, which I love with my everything. It's a pleasure to serve them. We come up with some really solid initiatives together. They're always there, ready, willing, and able to sit at the table with me and for us to meet those goals. As it relates to the current crime upsurge in my electoral district, and, you know, I said it in the House last week, it's considered a crime hotspot, that electoral district. And, you know, it's not something to be proud of at all. And we've spent some time as young persons in the district speaking to what the challenges are. A lot of the young persons who are engaging in that particular life and have seen, you know, the minorities speak to the fact that it's because they're unemployed. And so government has a role to play in the fact that, you know, we've had this challenge in that particular district and across the island by extension. Most of these young persons are employed. They are gainfully employed too. We have a lot of work to do as community and getting back into that mode where it took the village to raise a child. And where all community groups, side by side and hand in hand, have to come together to ensure that we work towards creating the type of Tobago we want to see and to be proud to call home. And so it can never be an area representative is left with the burden of ensuring that a community is held together. We have our churches and all these community groups I spoke to earlier having to come together. And we saw a perfect example of that just last week, where Adrian Mark, one of my residents, he no longer lives in the district. But of course, when your navel string bury in a district, you bury in a district. And with the recent upsurge in criminal activity there, even leading to the unfortunate death of a very young resident, Mr. Beres Joseph, Mr. Mark pulled community groups together, ably supported by area rep. But I told him, listen, in these scenarios, sometimes it's good for a resident to take the charge. Sometimes you don't want the political face as always being the lead of such a charge. And so he took the charge and got all the denominations together, all the churches, Baptist, Seventh-day Adventist, Church of God, Moravian, all together, to sit and come up with a strategy, of course, where we include a spiritual, you know, calling into that electoral district to ensure that we had that ability for us to see that it's bigger than us. And it's something that needs to be pulled back, and the community needed to be able to understand that, again, it takes a village to raise a child. And we've gone so far from that. We've gone so far from parents taking full responsibility and, you know, just depending on the education system again to be able to grow their children up for them. From a neighbor being able to correct a child. We've gone so far from that. And so it's time for community to get back to the traditional values. Of course, change is always welcomed, but we want us to go back into a space where Tobago maintains its moral values and the ability for communities to come together to ensure that we look out, you know, for children and to ensure that they grow up in a particular way where they understand that they have to turn out into positive contributors to society and how all of us must be a part of that.
Thank you. Well, viewers, we're going to take a quick break right here and we'll be back right after this. See you soon.
Welcome back, viewers, to Beneath the Surface here, right here on Tobago Updates. And yes, we are chatting with Assemblyman Miss Zorisha Hackett. Miss Hackett, during the conversations, we touched on so many aspects, education, especially where early childhood up to primary school to even high school. But as we know, we have a lot of Tobagonian students who are studying whether in Trinidad, whether in KFIL, Mona, or even internationally. And you would have made an interesting contribution where you want Tobagonians to really have pride in who they are.
Yes.
And it starts with our tertiary education students because they are going to get a degree or master's to come back to contribute to the island.
Yes.
And while Trinidad has GATE, thankfully we have a program here called DATAS.
Well, Trinidad and Tobago has GATE.
Yes, Trinidad and Tobago has GATE.
But we have an additional financial assistance program here.
Called DATAS.
Yes.
So, talk to us a bit about DATAS and some of the assistance it lends to tertiary level education
Right.
students?
So the Department of Advanced Training and Advisory Services under the Division of Education is a service or department, are responsible for providing financial assistance to students who qualify. So it's not a compulsory uh, bursary or grant or scholarship fund. As a matter of fact, it has gone so far beyond its remit because it's only allocated $500,000. In any given year, we go upwards of $4 million in the financial assistance provided to our Tobagonians who are studying on island, because we provide assistance to those who are studying there at the Tobago Hospitality and Tourism Institute, the only hospitality and tourism institute in the country. Of course, over the waters there in Trinidad, regionally or internationally. We have had challenges where persons come to the department asking for financial assistance to attend a university abroad for a program that's offered right here in Trinidad and Tobago. And so the challenge usually comes with either accreditation or being able to be integrated if particular license for integration are required, etc. And so we've also had challenges with persons who would want to migrate, but they want the financial assistance. So they're coming to the division and holding true and fast to this contract of, trying to come back here. And they know they would not be. Right. We also have particular career goals that do not fit into the developmental goals of the island. And so we've had to do some policy shift recently. And so very soon you're going to see us come out to the public to speak to the particular shifts. Chief Secretary, however, alluded to some of those shifts recently when he gave his New Year's speech, and he spoke to the focus of the Assembly over the next fiscal and beyond. And so there are particular areas that we're going to lend support to in the first instance, and then we're going to, on a needs basis, look at particular areas that fall out of those categories. And those areas are education, and we want to focus on special education, as well as qualifying males to get into the teaching fraternity, because there's a dirt there. We want to focus on tourism and everything tourism related. And when I say tourism, I'm speaking to the division now, where there is a overview on the culture, antiquities, elements. And so the Secretary of Tourism, and when she comes on Wednesday, she's going to speak to the scholarship program in partnership with the Division of Education that we're going to roll out, that is going to enhance and build capacity in those areas: tourism studies, culture, the arts, steel pan, even steel pan tuning, and all these other elements where we realize that there's some void and we need to build capacity here on the island. We're going to spend some time as well treating with agriculture, and of course health. We always want to ensure that we equip our professionals with the necessary funding and support to be able to come back and contribute to the island of Tobago. We're going to spend some time as well focusing on infrastructure, because there are particular areas, coastal engineering, and even persons getting into the fields of surveying and so on, where we understand that there's a shortage on the island. But more than ever, we're going to spend quite some time focusing on the public service and ensuring that there is public service training as it relates to supply chain management and, all these areas that we have challenges with procurement and so on. So the Assembly is going to be focused on these particular areas in the next academic year and beyond, because we realize that we have some challenges finding the bodies to place in these particular positions. We have an oversaturation in particular areas, law, for instance, right? A lot of persons are pursuing fields in law, but we have so many young professionals in the legal space and are now having challenges gaining employment. And there are other such saturated areas. So the focus must be on the areas we actually have that void, that gap, and in trying to bridge that gap through the financial support. We have challenges with students speaking to the fact that the support takes a bit of a time for us to be able to come up with, and that is because of the allocation. $500,000. And if one may not know that the Department of Advanced Training and Advisory Services funding come out of the DP. So the developmental programs budget, a part of that. And that's the same budget we have our school repairs. That's the same vote where, everything developmental comes out of. And so having to contend with all the infrastructural needs of our plants here on the island, all 57 schools, the libraries, and those special purpose companies, and have to juxtapose that against, funding for financial assistance. We juggle and deliberate on that over and over again, because we see the need to build capacity and to ensure that, and not only tertiary in the traditional sense, but technical vocational areas as well. And we have to ensure that we push that trajectory of a dual track of education, and not only the academic part strictly in that sense. And so the funding goes towards that as well. And so we would be rolling out the specific programs we're going to prioritize, and then we're going to have students understand, you know, what the needs analysis looks like. And we have students who also may be thinking of going off to, let's say, St. George's, and we want to spend some time focusing on what we have here, the University of the West Indies. A lot of persons may not know, but the funding is not even given on a national level to St. George's. And so we have so many students applying there. But when it's time for them to do their internship or so, they're going off to the United States and then falling in love with that particular pathway of medicine and not coming back to contribute, because it's a grant and it's expected that if you're afforded such a grant or a bursary, that you come back and contribute to Tobago's development. And so we would be spending some time really zeroing in and doubling down on what we're going to be able to provide the assistance for once it aligns to the developmental goals of the island. And then, of course, if you have other avenues of being able to fund that, you have to come to the table very honest and open, because it's not just free money that you're going to get. For every student we fund, you know, it takes away from some other developmental goal. And so we want students to really even consider that working before you go off to university. That's how I did it. I had to work before I go off. I know everybody thinks that there's this time or clock at time and that's there. And if you don't come out of high school now and go straight in, you're losing out on something. But there is only so much of the resources to, you know, to go around all of the divisions and to ensure that we build this island. And so we have to really take a step backward and look at how we actually fund these programs and who really needs the assistance versus who just wants the assistance. And so we're going to continue trying our very best to stretch that $500,000, taking it all the way up to $5 million in some cases, to ensure that we educate our Tobago young persons. But we also want persons to come to the table understanding that it's a privilege to be able to get that support and to make the best of the opportunities afforded to them when they go off to tertiary.
Understood. And as you spoke to creating holistic students and that holistic development, sport plays a huge role when it comes to developing those students all around. But we are seeing the track and field season coming up, but the Dwight York Stadium is not available for the schools to use for their sporting activities in preparation for things like
I'm glad you noticed that. I'm glad you noticed that, Miss Felix. I mean, it's a heartbreaker. It's a heartbreaker because of the 8 education districts. Tobago excels both at the primary and secondary school level nationally, track and field. And we run into this challenge every track and field season, this second term track and field, January into March season, where we have challenges accessing the Dwight York Stadium, which is not under the remit of the Tobago House of Assembly, as you may know. And so, fortunately for the Tobago House of Assembly, we spent some time investing in that Shore Park recreation grounds. And that's where most of our schools had to utilize in preparation for zonals and, of course, national championships. And so we continue to be burdened with, I don't know if it's the timing that is always wrong, if we don't plan ahead, if we don't look at the bigger picture. And I know the stadium is being upgraded for Carifta, and that's all well and good. But I believe that in the development or the work program of any particular ministry, and in this regard, Ministry of Community Development and Sport, you must know that with the one stadium we have here in Tobago, our schools would be disadvantaged if they are not given the opportunity to utilize the turf that they would have to utilize nationally when it's actually time for national championships. And so I'm looking at how could we find a way that when we're rolling out repair works, we align it with the actual needs of the users of the particular facility. And so, yes, we've had schools having to, you know, utilize a field in or around their vicinity in preparation, but the real serious athletes are not partaking in the school's activities for fear of injury. You know, and so I want to make a call that Tobago needs to be given that priority as it relates to the facilities the Tobago House of Assembly is not responsible for. It's unfortunate that our 8 secondary schools, Hammond School of SDA doesn't really take part in these track and field events, but the 8 that are very serious about track and field be given the opportunity to utilize the Dwight York Stadium. It's our only stadium, and you could hear the passion in my voice because I feel very strongly about the fact that we have to always settle for something else. You know, when you have all these facilities in Trinidad, so if one is down, you have the opportunity to utilize another. We don't have such a luxury in the Tobago space. And so I'm calling on the powers that be to please be mindful of the timing of these repair works, because the Tobago athletes are disadvantaged whenever we have these types of works coming in their season. Yeah?
Understood. And Secretary, wrapping up, because, you know, we're out of time.
We are? I thought we were going to be here till 9:30.
Okay, well, let's go till 9:30. So, looking forward for 2025 and your vision, you know, for this last lap, because, you know, very soon you have to return to the polls. What can we expect to see?
If I return to the polls.
Will you be returning to the polls?
That's something I'll have to sit and really internalize and make some peace with my maker and see if, you know, it's a lot. It takes a lot out of you. And again, I cannot make a decision that I'm going back to the polls on my own. I have to go back to my community in the same way it started. Go back to my community and you know, seek their support again, even before I, you know, make that decision of being screened. You know, I have to go back to the residents of Bethesda, Leketo, Golden Lane, and that part of Woodlands that I'm responsible for and ask them if they're satisfied. For the most part, with, you know, my ability to advocate on their behalf, and if I should be given the privilege to continue advocating on their behalf. But right now, I am trying to get through with that mandate I was given for the first 4 years. I don't know what is going to be afforded of me. I'm technically in 2 terms, because if you count that 11 months that I was area representative of Plymouth, Golden Lane, and now Bethesda, it didn't last 4 years, but it's considered a term. And so this is my 2nd term, technically. And I look back at the last 4 years, and well, 3, and we're going on to 4. And I look at how much I was able to achieve for my residents, and I look at how much more there is to achieve. One of that being that Culloden recreation facility, as we were speaking about sports, and the fact that, you know, they have advocated so strongly in that Golden Lane area for a place they can call home, because they have a lot of talented athletes and they have to juggle between the Table Peace Recreation Ground and the Mariah. And it's not that every village should be afforded a recreation space. I mean, we're in close proximity here on the island, 116 square miles. You can find a recreation space just a stone's throw away from your village. But when you have so much talent in one space and you're seeing an upsurge, as we spoke to, of crime and so on, and you're hearing the young people asking you for a particular facility, and hearing that cry for 21 or so years before I became area representative, and be given by an area representative who served 3 terms. Yeah, there was one particular area representative who sat in that seat for 3 consecutive terms. And that, again, was dangled as a carrot and a stick to residents there. Then you had another area representative serving 4 years, 1 term. And she was unable to deliver as well. And it's so difficult to deliver in 1 term, yeah? And then you're hearing that. And I walked that particular area electoral district, not promising my residents anything. I spent most of the time listening, because I saw area representatives before me making promises they could not keep. Same political organization, but even when the face changed, the promises were not able to be materialized. And I decided to do it differently. I decided to listen and make notes and advocate strongly for the things that I knew that my residents deserved. And one of that was the Leketo Community Facility, which recently opened as well. The collective cry of Leketo, we need a space to be able to push culture and the arts, which we're known for. Golden Lane, we need a recreation space so we can be able to see the talent of our young persons move and transform into that place where they can become professionals in those sporting disciplines. And so it's one of the areas that is of priority to this assembly. And we're hoping to get through with that before the end of this fiscal. And so I'm really going to continue pushing the need for us to realize the dreams and aspirations of our people, the people that have placed us there. As we're on this as well, switching back to the division. We have 2 facilities that have been really near and dear to me as well. And we're going to open or recommission.
Okay.
We're going to recommission one this Thursday, and that is the Kendall Aquatic Facility. A facility that when we came into office, we saw in a total state of deterioration. The pools were literally leaking underground. We had to suction lines, and we just had to literally rebuild the pools, both pools, the training pool and the actual pool from the ground up. And of course, that came with deterioration from sea blast, and its location right there next to the coast cost us approximately $2 million to repair. And it has been closed for about 2.5 years because you just couldn't use the facility, you know? So we had to dig all the way under the pool and get those repairs done and just do everything from the bottom all the way back up. And so we're going to recommission that facility this Thursday from 10 a.m. There's also another facility that has been languishing. A lot of persons probably think this facility is under the division of community development, youth development, and sport, and that's the WIM Youth Development Facility. It's also under the division, the remit of the Division of Education, Research and Technology, obviously because it was the parent division before it split into Youth Affairs and Sport, and then was realigned to ComDev, Youth Dev and Sport. And so that facility, a brainchild of the former administration for over a decade, and moved through the hands of about 5 or so secretaries before it came to me. You know, it was only about 69% or so complete when we came into office, contrary to what the minority leader spoke to in the House about it being 90% completed just last Thursday, and I'm going to dispel that. That is not accurate. 69% with several administrative challenges and a debt left there for us to pay to get it up and running. Very soon we're going to see the doors of that facility open, another critical area where we must focus on youth and youth development, that WIM area. And so it's our responsibility as well, and it's going to be in our best interest to be able to provide the facilities that are necessary to ensure we engage and positively engage our young persons. So very soon we're going to see the doors of that facility finally opening. That's not a recommission, that's an actual opening, and we're going to be proud on such a day because, again, we have met so many incomplete, poorly maintained facilities. We spent most of our term treating with those matters, and so now we want to be able to open these facilities and give Tobagonians the assets they so deserve.
Excellent. Well, we want to thank you so much for your time this morning. We know we went over a bit.
Yes.
Is there anything that you want to tell Tobagonians and members of your district before we go off this morning?
I want Tobagonians to remember that although we operate within a political landscape, we are all Tobagonians first. All Tobagonians. And so there must come a time when we put aside the politics and we speak to what does it really mean when we push that mantra of making Tobago the greatest little island on the planet? Does it mean that we put party colors on and only when we're in governance, you know, we work towards that goal? Or is it that we understand that we each have a part to play in that vision? Yeah. And so I want us, even in the coming of the silly season, and we call it that for a reason, is for us to look back and see. When you look at governance on this island and the fact that for 3 years you had a brand new administration, none of us ever had been in a role such as this one before. There was no one to pass a baton on to us. And so we had to almost operate as on-the-job trainees, which there is nothing to feel ashamed of. As an administration, we had to start this thing from the bottom and work our way upwards. And so we've been having a lot of comparisons about what happened before us and how much we were able to achieve in these 3 years. But I want Tobagonians to be very, very reflective of the fact that if you compare our first term in governance to the first term in governance of our predecessors, you're going to see that you got more bang for your buck under this TPP administration. It's clear as day, and I dare anyone to say otherwise. And comparing us to a 21-year legacy is also not justified. It's also not fair. So it's either we're compared pound for pound, first term versus first term. And if we were able, and I'm saying we as an island, to give the former administration 5 terms to get the job done, and we can even speak to how much they were not able to get done in 5 terms, then Tobagonians must also sit and really contemplate if this administration deserves the opportunity to be able to bring the development the island truly needs. And so I want you to pray for us. I want you to stick with us, to keep holding our hands, giving us the constructive criticism, because I welcome that. We're all new to this, and so we're learning as we're growing in the politics to be able to be fair in the assessment, though, and for us to continue to love and respect each other as Tobagonians. Yeah?
And wrapping up, Miss Hackett, if you were to go back in time and speak to little Zia, what piece of advice would you give to her?
Little Zia. I would tell little Zia that this world is a cruel place, but you must understand the contribution that you're making to it and keep that as your focus. You know, I think that I have gone through some really serious challenges in and out of the politics. And I think one of the things is that confidence I have in myself, you know, and the fact that I understand that there's so many people rooting for you, even more than those that are rooting against you. And the fact that resilience and that ability to strive even beyond the obstacles is what makes you or defines you as an individual. And, you know, to keep prayer as that shield and buckler in everything you do. Before you step out there, you cover yourself in God's grace. Yeah, and his guidance, and you go out there and get the job done. I think I would go back and tell myself, you know, the obstacles would come, but you have all that is required of you to overcome them. And so I want to thank you all for the opportunity for such an interview today. I have a major heads of department meeting this morning. We're going to go through all our strategic goals for the final year of this term, and for us to continue doing the good job as the Division of Education, Research and Technology. And as well, I want to tell my electoral district that I am very, very proud by their support of me. You know, I feel like almost like, you know, they have covered me in a particular way where, you know, not a bad word or not a bad condemnation can happen with their area representative, and they're very protective of me, and I'm very protective of them. And I want us to continue in this beautiful relationship we have as, you know, the area that is beautifully called Bethesda Leketo. And so thank you again. Thank you, Tobago. God's richest blessings and guidance to each of you.
All right, I want to again say thank you so much to you and wish you all the best.
Thank you.
Guys, we want to thank you so much for being a part of this morning's discussion. Thank you for your likes, your shares, and your comments, and all that you have been doing to make Tobago Updates the #1 broadcaster here on the island of Tobago. We want to remind you that we continue our Beneath the Surface series this week, and tomorrow we are going to see Mr. Assemblyman Niall George is going to be on our GMT session, and we are also expecting Mr. Wayne Clark
So we have a long program tomorrow
in the morning show. So guys, the conversations continue, and we hope to continue hearing what our representatives are doing within their districts as well as in their different divisions. Again, we want to say thank you and have a great day.